Hey everybody, how's it going?
Think
I
couple
say go
minutes
for it.
past,
Yeah.
yeah, a couple minutes past the starting time. Want to make sure we stay on track, so gonna go ahead and get started. Appreciate everyone joining. Today's ticket webinar is going to cover the Power Automate topic. Tagline is Turbocharge your business processes. Looking forward to walking through what that means. So, quick agenda and intros. I think I know a lot of the folks on the call from conversations we've had over the past couple of years. My name is Joel Doss. I'm the director of sales. I wear a few different hats around Ticket, including customer success and so on. So looking forward to participating in today's webinar. Adam, you want to intro yourself?
Sure thing. My name is Adam Dizaki. I believe I know probably several of you on this call from Technically Speaking or any other interactions we've probably had over the last, well, I was going to say several months, but the last couple of years perhaps. I'm the director of product management, and I can't wait to show you what we got coming with Power Automate.
Excellent. Okay. So in reviewing the attendee list, I see a lot of familiar names. So, the background on Ticket and who we are is probably a little bit redundant. If this is your first time attending one of our sessions or even speaking to us, who is Ticket? Well, Ticket is a product that is an ITSM product that's built for the Microsoft ecosystem. What does that mean? Well, it means that we are ITSM solution experts. We are a product developer, but right alongside that, we are ITSM consultants, and we've always chosen to operate and build our products around Microsoft technology specifically. When it comes to Ticket, we've always seen a huge opportunity to help our customers eliminate friction with their end users by bringing the ticketing processes, ITSM processes into teams, especially because end users are famous, especially over the last few years, for making comments such as, our entire organization is living and breathing, collaborating, communicating in teams. Why does IT keep sending us to a standalone portal when we need help? And that is a kind of a common problem that Ticket does solve. But in our view, where things get really interesting, especially in terms of Ticket's ability to scale to the organization, is the fact that Teams resides in the M365 ecosystem. So not only do you have the benefits of ticketing in Teams, you have Intune integration. You have the ability to really sort of turbocharge reporting by leveraging Power BI, and of course Power Automate for automating processes. So that is, of course, the core of today's conversation. So without stealing too much of Adam's thunder, we're going to get into some specifics in the session today, some demonstration of enhancements that are being made to the Power Automate connector. You're going to see a lot of reference to one of Ticket's probably better known functionalities called Lifecycles, which enables organizations to operationalize, incident requests, service request fulfillment, change management processes. And we're going to see how our enhancements around the Power Automate connector fit into those life cycles specifically. But again, not to steal too much of Adam's thunder, we're probably ready to get into some examples. Adam, did you have anything you wanted to add there in terms of what you're planning to cover?
Yeah, actually, as a matter of fact, so before we jump into the demo, just a little bit of a preview of what's coming with the Power Automate connector. Those are real screenshots. Those are real pieces of functionality that will be arriving in the Power Automate connector. I will do my best to touch on as much of what you see on this screen as possible. And I'm going to do it through kind of the course of a couple different scenarios. I wanted to run through what it's like to provision a new Microsoft team, but gate approvals. I want to run through kind of some new hire scenarios, maybe with HR approval and some dynamic approvals, creating shared mailboxes in M365, because that may not be entirely obvious how one can actually do that in Power Automate. And then I want to touch on something which I will just ambiguously say is just a little different. So yeah, I would
All
say
right.
let's go.
one final comment, I meant to mention this earlier. We do have a Q&A functionality in the webinar today. So if you want to ask questions, please feel free to do so. Sometimes some of those questions are a little bit more individual customer specific, such as, do I have this functionality as part of my subscription? If not, how do I get it? We may not address those live, but we will follow up with you afterwards. But we welcome the questions. We're going to do our best to get to them during the session. Really like to see the participation. So
Yeah,
sorry, Adam.
And if you have questions that you would like to ask but don't want us to publish, all you have to do is just put that in the question of like, don't publish this, and we can possibly just go through it and we won't share it out to like the larger group if you'd like to do that. So again, open Q&A. Also, while chat is closed, you should be able to at least react with emojis. So if you want to do that, we're not going to stop you. That's certainly, it's not frowned upon in the least. I would encourage it. I think that covers it for me. Joel, do you have anything else? Otherwise, I'll take your screen.
Perfect.
All right. Well, let me know when it appears. Or if someone wants to throw a thumbs up, that'll also do it as well.
I just saw one. We're good.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Fantastic. So like I said, I want to run through a handful of different scenarios with what's going to be coming with the updates to our Power Automate connector. And I want to start first with actually creating a brand new team in Microsoft Teams. So if I were to say something and start in Fluent, let's just say like, new team creation. And of course, like I think this is probably a process that many of you are familiar with. I want to apply a certain template. I want to create a new Microsoft team. And so that's the template I'm going to use. I want to answer this custom form right now because I want to like make sure we can get through this and we have enough time to cover all the other scenarios. So what's the team I want to create? I'm going to call this Espresso. This is the team that gets things done fast. And is it public or private? I'll make it private. Let's hit save. And the requester I'm going to make is Alex. And let's just hit create. So I'm going to get this ticket created. And obviously, it should go without saying that while I'm in Tikit's agent portal, it wouldn't matter really how this ticket comes in. I could get this ticket created via Tikit Virtual Agent. I could have someone create the ticket and apply the template afterwards. Or we could do what I just did right now, which is I'm going to create the ticket from scratch, apply the template, apply the life cycle and everything else in a single go out of the gate. Now, this screen also probably looks familiar to many of you. This is the edit ticket screen. We can see the currently active lifecycle on this ticket. And if I head over to lifecycle, what you're going to notice is that, of course, my lifecycle consists of two phases. Now, you'll see I have an approval here. This probably does not look all that different than to what you're used to seeing because it's an approval. That's how it works today. But there's a very small nuance that's involved in this. And it's going to start actually with how was this lifecycle built? Well, this lifecycle was built by the looks of this. And I'm actually going to jump into the IT approval phase. And I want to draw your attention to one thing in specific, and that is you'll notice there are no approvers on this approval. I've built a lifecycle. I've defined the phases of work. I've added an approval, and I don't have to define the approvers. And yet I do have two approvers right there. So where do they come from? Well, the two approvers actually came from our updates to the Power Automate connector. And I have this flow called create team approval. So I want to just jump into it so we can all see how this works, what this looks like, and what you can expect when this releases. Well, we'll get to the launch date later. So I'm going to say anytime a ticket is created, I would like to get the manager of the requester, because this is a very common request. We've seen this on the roadmap. We've known this has come up on Technically Speaking, is I want the requester's manager as defined in Microsoft Entra to be the first approver. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say get their manager based on the requester's email address. I can now say I want to get the approvals associated with the ticket. This is a new action that we're going to be introducing. And in the get approval step, you'll notice that I can now filter on a few different parameters. Now, of course, I need to feed this a ticket ID, which I can get from my trigger, the thing that actually kicks this flow off. I can define a couple of different parameters. And for the sake of argument, I'll just click show all so you can see them. So I can filter on approvals on a ticket that has or does not have a life cycle. It doesn't matter. I can get those approvals, and I have means to filter for all of them. So in this case, I'm looking for all the approvals on a ticket of a certain life cycle in a specific phase. And I could, add a couple other filters if I wanted to, but certainly don't have to. It would probably depend on the number of approvals that I have. And in this case, I only have one approval. And then finally, I'm going to update the approvals that I retrieved from my get approval step. And again, since it's only one, I'm only ever going to be updating one approval. But you'll notice that Power Automate automatically for me has thrown this into a for each loop because I could return many approvals. So it's kind of just some guardrails just for my own safety. And as far as those update approvals go, you'll notice that I actually am passing two very different things. I'm passing the user principal name of the manager, right? Their email address, essentially, comma, and then I can hard code a value. I can set a static approver in my update approval action. And in doing so, you'll notice that by the time I created this ticket, by the time that I went into it, the flow is already done. And we might as well just carry along with this. So I'm going to click approve on this because I want to make sure our process continues forward. All right, approval's been confirmed. Fantastic. I want to refresh this. And let's just go back to another flow very shortly here. You'll notice my ticket's actually already been resolved, and that phase has been completed. And the other thing that's actually part of our Power Automate refresh that's coming is that you'll have the ability to actually add Power Automate tasks directly into a phase of work wherever you see fit. So apart from approvals and tasks that are part of phases, there are now going to be Power Automate flows that are part of phases. And one of the Power Automate flows I've added here is create a team. Why should I have to go to the Teams admin center to create a team or go through the Teams UI to go create a team? Maybe I want to put some process and rigor around what teams should be called or could be called or who's allowed to actually submit those requests. This is what Tikit and Tikit Lifecycles grant me along with our updates to the Power Automate connector. So now, what does this flow look like? Well, let's go over here. This is my create a team flow. And you'll notice that this looks a little different as well because it has a couple new actions and triggers involved in it. The first trigger that's involved is when a lifecycle PA task becomes active. So I can now hone in, I can zero in on a specific Power Automate task in a specific phase of work on a specific lifecycle and have a flow dedicated to the actual action of this task. So anytime a PA task becomes active, we're immediately going to get the ticket. Using that get ticket, we are going to parse the card answer JSON. I think this is a move that probably many of you on this call are familiar with. If you're not, it's also on our knowledge base. So there's certainly a walkthrough if you've never seen this before. And then using the responses that we get out of our parse JSON step, we are going to now create the team in Microsoft Teams. And as you'll recall, if I go to my custom form answers, I had a team name, I had a description, and I had if it was public or private. And again, that's exactly the fields that I've now mapped into my respective Power Automate flow. What's the name of the team? What's the description? Is it public or private? And just for proof, here's that team that just got created. Right, so I'm in Teams Admin Center. I can now see that the team was created. I didn't have to go here. I didn't have to manage this. This is just simply done all through Tikit now. All right, so that is the first one. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. We'll try our best to answer them. I'll pause if I possibly can in the middle of this to try to answer them. But if not, I'm going to go on to the next one. I want to go on to the next scenario that we want to address, and that is, what if I want to onboard a brand new employee? What if I want to bring someone into the organization? Well, this is a new hire. I'm going to follow my new hire onboarding request and hit save. And again, I want to answer this now. I'm not going to send this out because I can get this done much quicker. I want to hire Harvey Birdman. He's going to be our lead counsel. I think I probably spelled that wrong, but I can just go forward with this. He's going to work in legal, and he's starting on, let's say, next Tuesday. And he's going to be full-time. Hit save. Again, define a requester. I'll hit create, and we'll get this ticket created. So my new hire ticket's been created. Fantastic. Let's go into that. And once again, I'm going to jump right back into what is the life cycle associated with this new hire. Now, again, process looks fairly familiar here compared to what we just did in new team creation, right? We have some approvals set on the initial phase of work, in this case, an HR approval. And again, it's doing the same exact thing that we actually just did, which was I want to get, anytime a ticket is created, specifically of this particular template, I want to get that ticket, I want to get the manager, I want to get the approvals, and I want to update those respective approvals with that user's manager, the requester's manager, and a person I statically define. Now, the question you may be asking yourself now is, this looks awfully familiar. It looks so familiar. Why do you have multiple flows for this? In fact, why wouldn't this just be one flow? Why wouldn't I have a single flow that manages, here's the approvals, here's the actions, here's all this other stuff? And the reason for that is because I think it actually behooves you to separate out your business logic from your IT logic, right? The initial shaping of your work, the business logic of your work is its own dedicated flow. The actual action, the emphasis on creating the user and doing various other things with their account, that's the IT logic. It's the operational logic. And by keeping them separate, it means that you can go into either one and edit them as you see fit without disrupting the other. So once again, let's just click approve. We'll go forward on this. I'm going to go refresh. And then I also want to, of course, go into what does our new hire account creation look like? So I'm going to hit edit. And let me go over here. And let's just jump into our new hire provisioning flow. Now, there's a couple things going on in here. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. Hopefully everyone can still see it. Now, again, I'm still doing the same maneuver. Anytime a lifecycle PA task becomes active, because again, if we go back into our lifecycle and you'll notice we already kind of flew through one of those phases of work because, of course we did, because Power Automate should just be flying through this. We actually had a provision accounts phase. And it's the second phase of work. It automatically happens. There's no work that needs to manually be done. And this is the flow that it's associated with. So anytime a lifecycle PA task becomes active, we're going to get that ticket, and then we're going to do something with Azure Key Vault. So for the uninitiated, Azure Key Vault is a password secrets credential store that is hosted in Azure. And allows you to securely store credentials and encrypt them in a central location. Now, why would I do something like this? Why would anyone do something like this? Well, for one, it means that I don't actually have to expose secrets or passwords or put things in plain text directly in my flows. The second thing that it also means is now I can actually have multiple flows referencing the single same shared secret. So if you imagine if I had an onboarding flow, a transfer flow, a password reset flow, they could all reference the same secret or different secrets. But the point is there'd only be one place to update them, but multiple flows to actually consume them. So that's what I'm doing here with Azure Key Vault, which is another native piece of functionality inside of Power Automate. So I'm going to get the secret. In this case, it's my new hire's password, because in order to create a user in Entra, I need to actually set a password on the account. I'm going to parse the JSON again of the ticket that I got created with. Because the other question we've also received on specifically around like new hires has been, it'd be really great if based on how someone answered a custom form in a new hire lifecycle or any other lifecycle, if I could go down different paths based on how they actually answered that question. And that's exactly what we've done here. Because once we parse the JSON to get the custom form answers out of the ticket, I can use Power Automate's native condition for a switch and say, well, based on the department that came out of parse JSON, which again, I want to highlight here just so you could see it. Here's my CS department. Based on that department, I'm going to choose different paths of logic. And so in the case of an HR employee, I'm going to go down path 1. In the case of a legal employee, I'm going to go down path 2. And in the case of anything else, I'm going to go down the default path. Now, there's a couple benefits to this approach because it means that I can be iterative in my building out of a particular lifecycle, of a particular flow. I don't have to come out of this with whole cloth. I can iterate my way through it because I always have this default statement. It's the thing, it's my fallback. It's what I'm always going to land back on if I don't have a case to find. And so let's go into this Entra account. Now you'll notice that I'm forming the display name, the nicknames, the passwords. Again, the password came from my Azure Key Vault, their user principal name, their given name, their surname. And if I want to, of course, I can define other properties such as their job title, their department, and other things that we get from the custom form. And there's two other things actually remaining here, though. And you'll notice that on the legal path of logic here, I have an add task. And this is another action, another piece of functionality that is coming with the Power Automate connector refresh that we're doing, to where you're actually going to be able to add tasks and or approvals into a ticket. And that ticket can or doesn't have to have a lifecycle associated with it. Because if we come back to our ticket here, and I minimize this, you'll notice that when I started this lifecycle, I didn't have provision hardware here. And now I do. So I'm now allowed to shape dynamically the nature of a lifecycle as it moves through its various phases of work, even if it's not part of that lifecycle definition. And for the sake of argument, I want to just go in here so you can see that here's my lifecycle definition, employee management onboarding. If I go into other account information, I only have a single task in the last phase of work. And yet in the ticket that I created, I have 2 tasks. Because again, I hired someone in the legal department. That is the path that it took. And finally, we have an update PA task. And with our update PA task, which we did in the last one, and we also did in here as well, we are marking the status of that PA task respectively. So what kind of options do I have in here? Well, I marked it as succeeded. What else could I mark it as? Well, I could mark it as canceled, as failed, or as in progress if I want to. And the reason that we did this and we're, publishing this into the Power Automate connector is because, as you're probably no doubt aware and familiar with in terms of ticket lifecycles, is that we have transition logic. You're allowed to say, if something fails, go to this. If this one thing passes, go to the next phase of work. You're allowed all different means to define the logic of how to move forward in your lifecycle. So we're honoring that as well. So in the lifecycle definitions, you will actually be able to say, like, if a PA task fails, fail the lifecycle. If it gets canceled, just skip to the next step or go back to the previous step. All of that logic will be preserved even with the introduction of PA tasks into phases of work. Okay, third one. I want to get to creating a new shared mailbox. Let's go back here. Let's go add new shared mailbox. And I'll apply a template. Here's my shared mailbox template. And actually, I did forget though. I apologize. Oops. Here's my user that was created in Microsoft Entra. Harvey was created in legal. Almost forgot to show that. Sorry, back to this. So now let's create that shared mailbox. So I want to say accounts payable. That's the name of the shared mailbox I'd like to create. I'm going to hit save, requester. Again, Alex, doesn't entirely matter. I'm going to hit create. I'm going to go into shared mailbox. I want to get over to that flow again. Again, this process repeats itself. I'm saying, like, anytime I have one of these come in, shape that approval dynamically. So let's go ahead and get that approved and created. Now, The reason I actually wanted to highlight this particular flow and this particular life cycle is because there's not actually a native means to do this inside of Power Automate. And well, good. All right, my ticket's already resolved. So what did this actually do? Like, how did we create a shared mailbox? Well, again, I'll skip over the manager approval step. I think we all know what that looks like now. What does create a shared mailbox look like? Well, create a shared mailbox actually relies on a couple different things. So once again, we're going to say anytime a lifecycle PA task becomes active, in this case, provision our mailbox in Exchange, we're going to get that ticket. We're going to parse the JSON to get the custom form answers. And then we are actually going to integrate and call an Azure Automation runbook. So once again, for the uninitiated, Azure Automation is a automation platform that Microsoft provides that allows you to write automation or runbooks in either Python or PowerShell, your choice. Now, the reason I have to do this is because there is no native means to actually create a shared mailbox in Power Automate, but that's okay. I can do it with PowerShell. I can do it with Azure. And I can do this all starting from Microsoft Power Automate. So I'm going to create an automation job, and you'll notice that I actually can pass in values. I can pass in parameters required to start that job inside of Azure Automation. And if you've never seen Azure Automation, that's okay, because I actually have that one ready too. So let's go back over here. Just give me 1 second to get this. So here is Azure Automation, and here is the job that just ran, right? 10:57 a.m. So like 2 minutes ago. It was fairly quick. You can see that I actually have output associated with this. Accounts payable shared mailbox has been created. Great. It's clearly there. In fact, if I were to go back to accounts payable and I were to go to my users, you would see here's my accounts payable mailbox in Microsoft Entra as a shared mailbox as it exists in my directory. But this still doesn't exactly get to how did I do this. And if you don't know PowerShell, or maybe you do know PowerShell, like that sounds like a lot. Like what is the effort involved to actually execute this? Well, don't worry, because I also have the PowerShell associated with this, because you, I think, might be interested to know. It's actually only a couple lines. Now, if you've never seen PowerShell before, I'll quickly walk through this. But if you have, forgive me. We have a parameter block where we say, like, this is where we're going to take input, right? So the user's display name, and that user's display name again is this value that we passed in from our parse JSON step, which again is accounts payable. We're going to connect to Exchange Online. We are going to create a new shared mailbox. And again, if you've never seen this, I'd like to think it's actually relatively simple. Our command is new mailbox. The type is shared. We're going to give it a name, which is what came in, a display name, an alias. And then I'm going to write some outputs so that I have the long-term confirmation that I know that this actually got created, which is right there. That's all it took. So I'll briefly pause here in the event that someone is probably taking screenshots or furiously writing this down. Again, it's only like 2 lines of PowerShell to create a shared mailbox. And again, this is done with Azure Automation and a Power Automate flow calling that Azure Automation. And again, all of it starting from tickets, starting from a ticket lifecycle. Once we get that manager approval, we begin the phase of work to create a shared mailbox. That shared mailbox kicks off a Power Automate flow. This flow then runs and starts an Azure Automation job and creates that shared mailbox. So a little bit of code, not too much. So now on to the very last part of all this. And I did show the accounts payable mailbox. On to the very last part of all of this. And it's something that you may have seen kind of this whole time as I was running through all of these demos. And that is, Adam, what gives with that email, or I'm sorry, that ticket that says breach associated with email address? It's been there the whole time. And in fact, it's actually been there since like the exact top of the hour. and I didn't create it. And it was definitely there when we started this webinar. How did it get there? So for that, before I click into that, I'm just going to start with Power Automate. So in Power Automate, I have a flow that reoccurs every single day at 10 a.m. So this runs automatically. And what it does is it reaches out to the service called Have I Been Pwned? If you're not familiar with it, Have I Been Pwned is run by an individual by the name of Troy Hunt. It is a website that runs on Azure. And if you type email addresses into it, for example, your own respective email address, it will actually search and tell you, is your email address associated with a security breach out in the wild? So unfortunately, that's kind of, those norms that exist. But you have a way to at least sanity check this. And the reason that I want to sanity check this and the reason I want to run a flow like this is because maybe there's certain individuals within my organization or even my own respective email address where I wouldn't mind running it against a database to know, should I go rotate some of my passwords? Because if a breach is found, that's the first thing I want to do from a security response angle. I want to start rotating passwords that I've used that email address with somewhere. Now, rather than waiting on a security team or waiting to see if you got an email or a digest of like maybe if your email is associated with a breach, or maybe you're not even doing this, we can proactively reach out to Have I Been Pwned as a service. We can find out if we're associated with a breach and then proactively create a ticket in Tikit as soon as possible. So this actually kind of now starts moving the needle away from users and employees submitting requests and going through respective life cycles, and now starts moving to IT operations. And you can operationalize, if you will, some of that proactive monitoring. And in this case, proactive security monitoring associated with an email address. So I want to actually walk through how this actually works. So again, we have a reoccurring schedule, happens every day at 10 a.m. I once again am going to reach out to Azure Key Vault because that's where my passwords and all my secrets and certificates are actually stored. I don't write them into plain text inside of my flow, which means, again, I have one place to go update them, one place to consume them, and a means to now use as many flows as I wish, all pointing at that same secret. I'm going to then get the email associated that I want to monitor. I want to know, do I have one email I'm looking at? Do I have 10 emails I'm looking at? I'm going to securely store those email addresses in Azure Key Vault as well. Now, you don't have to, but again, something you could do. And then we're going to check, have I been pwned? We're going to check the service, have I been pwned? Now, this begs the question of like, well, how is this being done? Because there's not an official connector for it. I believe there's actually one in the preview region for have I been pwned. But if you wanted to go do this like today, right now, this is how we can do it. And we actually do it with another piece of native Microsoft functionality inside of Power Automate, and that is the HTTP action. It allows me to form an HTTP request. And according to Have I Been Pwned documentation, if I want to get the breaches associated with an email address, all I have to do is go to this URL, put the email address at the very end of it, and in my headers, I provide my password, my key, my API key, my ticket token, if you will. And then this is going to go run and see, are there associated breaches? And then I have a condition. And my condition is actually really simple. Does the status code that came back from have I been pwned, does it equal 200 or not? Now, 200 essentially just means all is good. The page loaded. Results were returned. So we know that we actually have breaches associated. If we return anything other than 200, there's no breach. Everything's fine. All is right in the world. Continue along your day. But what does the path look like for when a breach is detected? Well, we're going to create a ticket in Tikit. This is an action you're no doubt familiar with. We are going to parse the JSON of the have I been pwned response. So this is the parse JSON of this step right here, because have I been pwned will actually return a payload. It will return an array of all the breaches associated with that email address. And then finally, what we're going to do is we are going to create a private comment on the ticket that was created for every breach that was associated with this email address. Now, depending on your school of thought and philosophical outlook on how to create and manage tickets, you'll notice that I have a for each loop on every time there is a breach, leave a private comment. You could say, I want to create a ticket for each breach associated with that email address. Again, the choice is yours. That's kind of the beauty of Power Automate. You can define what you want to do with this. So let's actually go look at this ticket, breach associated with email address. So I'm going to go into this, and you're going to see like how this ticket has been well formed through Power Automate. So breach associated with email. Here's the user whose email address was associated with this breach. You'll notice it's an incident. There's no template or anything assigned to this, but I do have all the comments of all the respective breaches associated with this email address. Now, I didn't do this here, but what you could do is you could optionally maybe have automation or other things kick in and say, like, I want life cycles associated with this. What is my playbook for actions I should take? Or you could have just a Power Automate flow, leave a comment, a private comment to the analyst, the agent that receives this ticket, and says, this is what you should do. You could define a method of procedure, a MOP, if you will. And you could say, like, hey, if you have more than 5, do this. If you have more than 10, do that. Or you could just have a blanket statement that says, like, reach out to the user and make sure they begin rotating their passwords. Again, all of this is possible inside of Power Automate and with Ticket and with several of the updates that are coming your way to the Power Automate refresh that we're going to be doing with this. So, okay, I think I can take a breath, possibly a sip of coffee. That wraps things up for me. Joel, feel free to take the screen back.
Yeah, kind of drinking from the fire hose there. I think we're doing pretty well on time. As suspected, there have been some questions raised. Number one being, when are these improvements going to be available? There's a long answer to that and a short answer. The short answer is within the next 2 to 3 weeks, we think. The longer part of that answer, you talked with us before, you know that, the mothership, aka Microsoft, needs to approve most of what we develop before we release it to customers. That is the step we are at right now. But we do expect release within the next couple of weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, likely.
Yeah. So what I want to add, and I shared this on Technically Speaking for those of you that were there, but if you weren't, so like Joel said, like we're shooting for essentially like the end of the month to have these updates out and live. But if you can't wait, you could technically deploy this in the preview region. So I'm just saying, we're still buttoning down a few remaining issues. Like we're still working through a few things, but it is functional. It is there. So just want to throw that out there. And I will now also kind of begin going through questions as well.
Fair enough. Okay. So yeah, I see some posted there. I'm going to retake the screen too while you're doing that.
So the question was, can the flow be edited to add tasks that will be assigned to other teams? You can add tasks to a ticket with or without approvals. You currently cannot assign that task to a team, but you can assign it to an individual. You can assign it to another agent if you so choose. Let's see, what else here? Yeah, do I have access to these integrations with M365 Service Desk? So the Power Automate connector and Lifecycles are exclusive to Ticket's ITSM tier. So I just thought I'd clear that up. How much does the PA connector cost? Again, this is part of Ticket's ITSM plan. So that is how you can access it.
Yeah, and I kind of alluded to this at the top of the session. We're happy to talk about that on a one-on-one basis with anyone who wants to take a look at upgrading to the ITSM tier for Power Automate or any of the other functionality that's there. So please don't hesitate to contact us on that.
Oh yeah. How long does it take to build one of these flows? So I mean, there's no direct answer to that question other than like it depends. It depends on the complexity of like what it is that you're building. So I think the new hire one is a good example of something that I started building just to say like, can I create a new user? And it was simply get the ticket, parse the JSON, create the user. It works. Immediately rev it and say, can I now build a switch condition based on the user's department? And then based on the department that's filled out, go down different paths of logic. That works, great. And then again, you can continue to iterate. So I know I'm not the first one to say this. I think when it comes to all things process automation, it's an iterative process. It's a never-ending process. There's always going to be something to improve, streamline, make faster, or make automated. And I would even really just power automate tasks that have yet to be created. I mean, every manual process is just one that has yet to be automated. So when you're building a lifecycle out, I guess that's the other way to look at this. You could build a lifecycle out with all of your manual steps, and then those become areas for review, maybe at the end of the month where you could say like, I think we can go automate this. Again, you don't have to come out of this with full, whole cloth. You can kind of just cherry pick your way through them and slowly iterate and develop as you go and replace all of those respective tasks with Power Automate tasks.
Cool. Adam, I'm moving on to the what's next slide. If you have another question you want to respond to, feel free.
Sure. No, keep going. I'll keep going. It's all good.
Okay. Well, just to work towards wrapping up the session, what's coming after this pending update, and the functionality that Adam has covered. We have more plans around, Power Automate improvements going forward. We're aiming for full feature parity with attributes around tickets, approvals, tasks, users, the ability to apply templates, the ability to add and remove attachments, general functionality being looked at and added around actions, ability to communicate as both ticket and TVA bots, as well as some branching functionality around the lifecycle transitions. So, Adam, if you want to elaborate on any of that, feel free. If not, we can move on.
Yeah, again, so in terms of like plans, like I said, we are shooting to have this Power Automate refresh out essentially at like the end of the month, and then we will immediately we slightly already have began working on that next refresh, which again, as Joel said, is full feature parity with the rest of Ticket. And again, touches on things like file attachment management, as well as applying templates, tags, teams, and a few other things as well. Probably the big standout one, though, that certainly I've heard directly has been the ability to communicate as those bots. So to be able to send custom messages as Ticket or as Ticket Virtual Agent.
Yeah.
We're really excited about that one too.
Yep. Appreciate the added color as always. Okay. Well, wrapping up. We, always like to remind our customers that we are customer driven. Like the feedback, we like the conversation. If you have any questions about anything that you saw today, especially how it might relate to your unique business process, please reach out to us. Our contact info is on the screen, of course, and there's no other questions. Certainly appreciate the interest in these sessions. Looking forward to the next one. Adam, you had one last comment, sounds like.
I did. Thank you. There was one last question. It was, with the refresh, will users be able to add attachments directly while answering questions in the custom form instead of having to complete a ticket first before adding attachments? That is not part of this refresh. However, that is not to say it's not something that we are looking at. I think we kind of perfectly understand the rationale and the ask around why people want to do something like that. But I could certainly reach out to you if you'd like to discuss further, or if you have anything other feedback, I'd love to hear it. So you know what? That's what I'll do. I'm gonna reach out to you. Just take a note for that.
All right. Well, thanks everybody. Looking forward to next time. And a recording will be sent out when available. Take it easy.